Welcome, everyone, to August 30th. It's our Touch of Torah with L'Dor Va-Dor. We're always pleased to have Rabbi Barry Silver providing us insight and interpretation of the upcoming Shabbat's Torah portion. Happens to be Deuteronomy SHOFTIM, which means judges. And I'll let Rabbi take it away. I do have the English if we want to read some, but I'll let you do whatever you want, Rabbi. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you very much. Thanks, Sharon, and thanks everybody for attending. We're going to read from the passage of Shoftim. As Sharon says, it means judges. You might also have heard the word mishpat. Mishpat means judgments or justice. So the passage, as its name implies, talks about appointing judges and how to make decisions. I'm going to read a portion of it, but part of it says you should not take bribes because bribes twist the words of the righteous and alter the vision of the most perspicacious. So if they were talking in today's parlance, they would say, don't take any campaign contributions because they tend to prejudice the decision maker and pervert our system of justice. It also has a prescription for how to choose your leader. As you may recall in the Torah, the leaders of Judaism were not really keen on picking and having a king. Samuel warned the people against it and said, having a king is not all it's cracked up to be. You're going to have somebody who's going to be perhaps a tyrant, a dictator who's going to amass great wealth, who might become corrupted. You're really better off without a king. And they said, we want to be like the other nations. We want to do what they do, and we want to be powerful. And if you have a monarch who's in charge, you'll be a more powerful, prosperous country. So he yielded and said, okay, you can have a king, but he gave this warning. So I'm going to share with you the, I guess it's a voter's guide for how to choose a king. And I want you to listen to it and then see who you think might qualify today and who might not qualify according to the Bible's guidelines for making this choice. If after you have entered the land that the Lord your God has given you and occupied it and settled in it, you decide, I will set a king over me, as do all the nations about me. You shall be free to set a king over yourself, one chosen by the Lord your God. Be sure to set as king over yourself one of your own people. You must not set a foreigner over you, one who is not your kinsman. Moreover, he shall not keep many horses or send people back to Egypt to add to his horses. Since the Lord has warned you, you must not go back that way again. And he shall not have many wives, lest his heart go astray, nor shall he amass silver and gold to excess. When he is seated on his royal throne, he shall have a copy of this teaching written for him on a scroll by the Levitical priests. Let it remain with him, and let him read in it all his life, so that he may learn to revere the Lord his God, to observe faithfully every word of this teaching, as well as these laws. Thus he will not be haughty toward his fellows, or deviate from the instructions to the right or to the left, to the end that he and his descendants may reign long in the midst of Israel. Does anybody have any thoughts about who might qualify in today's world to fit that description, and who would not qualify? Who are they warning against? Anybody want to share anything? Nobody comes to mind.
Well, somebody always comes to mind. Unfortunately, in my opinion, there was not a thorough investigation with regard to other issues with other potential candidates, other entities, other people close to the people who are now in charge that followed through, because there was a lot of controversy with regard to that particular issue as well. So of course, you're talking about the Trump situation, but there was also a lot of questions and a lot of potential evidence that was never followed through with the Hunter Biden situation. And I was very upset that there was no follow through on that, because as far as I'm concerned, based on the limited information that we had gotten, there was something to look into, and it was never followed through on. And I have real serious concerns about the upper echelon of our government. I mean, I'm really very, very concerned about it.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason it was never followed up, because there was nothing there.
Well, there was nothing there because no one's investigation. There were millions of dollars given to him.
Believe me, the opponents of Biden had millions, tens of millions of dollars, and lots of operatives to do a thorough investigation. So they did. They investigated as much as they could. What Biden's son did, by the way, it's not Biden, so it's not really all that germane, but what his son did was he got a seat on a government panel where he made lots of money based on his political closeness to Biden. So I'm not keen on that. That's not really a good thing to do. You shouldn't trade your political connections to make money. But on the other hand, he was trying to help improve things in Ukraine, which maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But that's not such a good thing. But it doesn't, in the general scheme of things, to me, it's kind of typical for what politicians do. It's not all that significant. But what this is saying is that you shouldn't have somebody who amasses a lot of gold. I don't know. I've been over at Mar-a-Lago, and I kind of comes to mind. And also a lot of wives. Shouldn't pick someone who has a lot of wives. And also you shouldn't choose someone who's haughty, someone who's a bragger. So it kind of is interesting to me as far as what it's trying to tell you. But I think the most significant thing of the passage is it's saying, don't put yourself in a situation where people are receiving money and bribes from others, because it's just going to, even if they're smart and even if they know what they're doing, it's going to make them corrupt, and they're going to not give you, they're not going to do the right thing. And I think the entire political process is just completely permeated with legalized bribery, which we call campaign contributions. Imagine what the government would be like if those were all made illegal. And we actually chose candidates based on how smart they are, how much integrity they have, what kind of people they are, what they've accomplished, instead of who can sell their soul to the highest bidder. I mean, that's what we have. The government is really one of the best governments that money can buy. It's really determined by how much money you raise, and people actually drive out other candidates. Oh, he's got all this money, we can't run against him. So that becomes the criteria. It's really not an election, it's more like an auction. And it really has us choosing people not based on their qualifications, but based on how they can pander to special interests. So I think the Torah here has something very valuable to offer. Of course, we know that you can't bribe a judge. Everybody knows that, and that's considered to be, illegal. But bribing a politician, apparently there's no problem with it. And we see it with the issue tomorrow that's coming up for a vote. And apparently the developer asked for a postponement, which may or may not be granted. But the developer, GL Homes, who wants to pave over the ag reserve, is extremely generous in his legalized bribery to the county commissioners. And so they tend to vote not based on the best interests of the people of Florida, but based on where they're getting their funding for the next campaign. And I assure you, as someone who's been working on this issue for 30 years, it is not a partisan issue at all. It's an equal opportunity panderer. The Democrats and the Republicans both feed at the same trough when it comes to these people. And that's why it's important for people to come out and speak up and let the politicians know that if they decide to follow the money, we're going to pay attention. And their political careers may be short-lived.
That's one of the primary concerns that we have with COBRA. I mean, we meet with all of the communities, and COBRA is very, very aware of that. There's a real pushback on that from them at this point.
Yeah. That's good. We need an electorate that's informed of what's going on. And so when the candidate sends out flashy brochures and has commercials that make them sound good, we should be thinking, how many developers paid them off, or how many real estate interests gave them money, or how many corporations or individuals doing bad things gave them money so they could do that. But the system has been corrupted, and the Shoftim, book of Deuteronomy, has been ignored. I'd like to now toss out something else to the folks who are listening. We're approaching the high holidays, the month of Elul. Elul is when we get ready. And, you know, rabbis get ready. We try to figure out, okay, what are we going to talk about, and what music are we going to have, and trying to plan it out. I'm curious if anybody listening here on the Zoom call has some thoughts on what do you think rabbis should be talking about this high holiday season? It's a time to check in and review and see where are we at as a people and where are we going. Does anybody have any thoughts on what you'd like to hear the rabbi talking about, what you think it should be a priority as we approach this new year? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I do. I think I'm thinking back to what your dad would impart on for us on the high holidays, and it was always something searching your soul for. You know, I remember one of his things he said was, you know, reaching out for your soul phone, you know, to have your communication with the powers that be. And so to take an inventory, take stock of where you are in this world and what you're doing today. Are you meeting your personal goals? Are we meeting our personal goals as Jews? Are we uniting as Jews? Are we doing what we want to do as Jews? Or, like your father used to say, are we revolving door Jews, in on Rosh Hashanah, out on Yom Kippur? And I think taking stock in ourselves, and I know you talk about this periodically on Shabbat, what we talked about last Friday night, you opened up the floor to, you know, why aren't we getting the young people? Why aren't we enticing people to represent their Jewish religion in synagogues and JCCs and in whatever Jewish activities there are, Jewish Federation, etc. I mean, everybody's having that same trouble. And I think you hit on it last week. People seem to want to, you know, comment about that. And I think that's the way to go, is just to talk about, you know, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And, you know, how can we be better people in the upcoming year? And how can we correct this? Something I wanted to say, if I can, back on the previous discussion, was when you talked about campaign contributions and how this judge's Shoftim parasha, I thought about lobbyists. And lobbyists are being paid by big money, whether it's pharmaceutical companies or whatever, gun, you know, there are the National Rifle Association, et cetera, you know, they're paying and they're standing on the steps of Congress to entice people to go with one way or the other, whether it's, you know, against guns, for guns, whether it's against whatever drug is being, you know, made up, you know, correct or whatever. And they're getting their ways. I mean, you said, oh, our judges are not corrupt, but I don't know if they're not corrupt, because certain people put them into the Supreme Court possibly, or put them into local courts, and they, you know, they might be paid off, you know, and certain people were put onto the Supreme Court because they would go along with the person who put them there's ideas. So I think that the country is being swayed by lobbyists and campaign contributions every single day. And I think that's why everything comes to a standstill, blue versus red, because everybody's fighting for their monies rather than for what's in their heart and the right thing to do.
Yeah, very good point. I agree 100%. The lobbyists, when I talked about legalized bribery, that's exactly what lobbyists do. Yes, I agree with you. I don't remember saying that I thought judges were not corrupt, because I agree with what you're saying also, especially at the highest levels. The United States Supreme Court, Florida Supreme Court, yes, they're picked by politicians. It's a really horrible way of doing it. We shouldn't pick judges by politics. It just corrupts the whole system, and it undermines our confidence in the law, especially when it used to be somewhat neutral. Now it's just blatantly overt. Whatever party's in office is going to put somebody who favors them, and they're going to stall and make sure that the other side can't do it. It's just so political that I agree with you 100%. And I also agree with your point, which is very well taken, that on the high holidays, we need to take stock of ourselves. It's very easy to point fingers at other people and what's going on in the world. We have some amount of control, but not that much. But we have absolute control over ourselves and what we do. And so that should be the focus on the high holidays, taking stock of ourselves. But what we need to try to do, my dad used to say that we should do it in a candid way, not a candied way. Not where we whitewash everything we do and rationalize it and pretend that what we're doing is good. But if we were a neutral outside observer, impartial, looking at our behavior, or as our ancestors imagined, if there was some supreme judge from on high who knew right from wrong and had no bias and could examine our behavior, how would we appear? That's very, very difficult to do. Most people don't really want to do it, but that is precisely what should happen at the high holidays. And if it doesn't, then we're not really getting the full measure of what we can obtain from the high holidays. It's difficult to do, but in life, the things that are the most difficult are often the most worthwhile. So because it's difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It means we should, because the benefits of really examining our lives candidly are tremendous, because they allow us to actually move forward and break free of some of the things that we do wrong. So I appreciate your sharing that with us, Sharon, and that will be certainly one of the focuses of the high holidays. Anybody else want to share some thoughts or ideas? What should we be talking about?
Well, I think
Rabbi,
okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead. Ladies first.
Thank you. I was just saying, getting in that same area that you're talking about. I mean, we have an obligation as citizens of this country to meet our responsibilities. What are our responsibilities? Our responsibilities are to go to the polls, even during the local elections. That's our responsibilities. And to vote the issues. I have brought this up on numerous occasions. Once you get to the main elections, you've already let the horses out of the barn. It's the people that are running in your local elections, the very local elections, that you have to make your voice and your conscience known. And I think if you're examining what it is that you do and the responsibility you have, not only to yourself, but to your country, you have a responsibility to your country to do your job. And your job is to pay attention to what's going on, even in the local elections, because that's going to make a difference. That's all I have to say.
It was Brandeis who said that the highest political office is citizen, and that taking your citizenship seriously is something we should do. And Valerie, I know you do that. I compliment you. You study the issues, you know the local candidates, you're well read, and you show up and vote. Most Americans don't even go out to vote. And the ones who do are kind of clueless about who they're voting for. They might know the president, but you're right. We need to really pay attention and study all the candidates for all the different offices. That's a very good point. Okay, who else?
Yeah, I would just say amen to that. And I think that's one thing that the Republicans have done very well is they have done the grassroots, they've done the school board, they've done the local people, and I think that that's going to make a big difference in the long run. Probably things that we'll see for the next 15 or 20 years. What I would like to see during the holidays is one thing that I absolutely adore is the blowing of the shofar. And I have a canned version on my phone, but I would really love to be able to tune in. And we did that last year on Zoom at my synagogue for at least the portion that Ashkenazi do, that week ahead of time. And I really like that. I think that really calls, I think it really calls my heart and my brain to attention as to what I need to be working on, over the holidays and so forth. So I wish I could find an online place that was blowing the shofar every day at 7:15 in the morning. I'd get up and listen to it. But anyway, I am disappointed that as a convert, I can't be king. No, seriously. I remember from Maimonides, the Book of Kings, that's as a convert, I'm not allowed to be the king. But, I do think we have to be, careful in who we choose. And do we like those people? Do we really need a king, or is that something that's going to, cause us problems? And I think the money thing that you mentioned is very true as well. And I think it's gotten better. I think they've tried to remove dark money, and I think they've limited the amount that you can give, each individual and each pack and each group, and at least they have to be identified. So, but I know for our judges, you mentioned, being nonpartisan, our judges are not identified by party, but they have a party. I'm in Arkansas. Of course they have a party. 9 out of 10 of them are Republican, but they simply don't put it on the flyers or anything. It's not put on the ballot. And then you really don't know. There might be that one Democrat that maybe, because I never hear what they have to say. There might be that one Democrat there. And lastly, I do feel like the internalization of that is important. For myself, it doesn't matter to me about judges because I'm not a judge. But what I can do in my own life is say, okay, am I treating the janitor at the synagogue as well as I'm treating the Rebbetzin?
Very good point. That's good. By the way, if you're a convert, according to the Torah, you can't be king, but you can still be a temple president. So
nice.
You're not limited in any way. You can be a rabbi or president. There's no limits. We truly appreciate Jews by choice who have decided and chosen to become Jewish. That's a really wonderful thing. The shofar, yes, it's a real highlight of the high holidays. We don't blow it every morning, but we certainly blow the shofar on the high holidays. And as you say, the meaning is really awesome. It's a call to do battle, but instead of against the enemy, to do battle against dark forces within ourselves. And it really is a very powerful wake up. It's kind of like saying, okay, you've been slumbering and walking through life without really reflecting. Wake up, take a look at yourself, see what we can do to change. It's great. And the symbolism that I like also about the shofar is hollow. And if it wasn't hollow, the wind wouldn't flow through it and you wouldn't hear any sound. It doesn't work unless it's hollow and hollowed out. And I kind of think that our souls are kind of like that too. If we have a lot of clutter and a lot of negativity, then our pure spirit can't flow through and it gets stuck along the way. So the high holidays is an opportunity to try to remove some of this negativity and clutter that hold us back so that we can allow the purity of our soul to flow through and make a beautiful, wonderful, sonorous sound. So the shofar is a beautiful symbol, and the calls are great too. It starts out broken. It starts out pure rather, and then it gets broken up. And then at the end, it's even a more pure, longer sound, which reminds us that we start out with a pure soul. Along the way, it gets sullied. But in Judaism, we believe we can recapture that purity. make it even better than before. So the shofar is a beautiful, beautiful symbol, and we'll certainly feature it prominently at L'Dor Va-Dor. Anybody else have some thoughts they want to share? We've heard some great comments. I appreciate that.
Well, I really think a convert should be the only one that should allow to be king, because a convert makes a conscious effort to follow their Judaism, whereas born Jews we just kind of fall into it. And some of us have studied it and some of us know what's going on, but a large part of the Jewish population just hangs out in the temple once in a while, whereas a convert makes sure that they know what they're doing. So they make a decision out of insight and not out of ignorance. Absolutely. And I think that's a very important point.
Yeah, a lot of Jews are born Jewish and they take it for granted and they don't consider it important at all because they didn't have to do anything about it. It just fell into their lap. It's amazing how many Jewish people have inherited this incredible legacy and just toss it aside. And I think partly, as we approach the high holidays, I think the Jewish leadership has to assume a lot of responsibility for that. It's our job to transmit the beauty and the importance and the richness of our heritage. And if people don't get it, and that's on us. That means we're not doing a good job of transmitting it. And I always find it pretty amusing. I talk to wedding couples all the time. And very often now they're Reformed Jews, or they were raised in that tradition. But I get this all the time. I'm a Reformed Jew. First of all, Reformed doesn't exist. It's called Reform because it's an ongoing process. Reformed implies that, okay, you've done all the reforming and now the changes have stopped. And now we have a set established body. It's not what reform is. It's reform because it's ongoing. But the funny thing is, they often say to me, I'm not just reform, I'm very reform. So then I always ask, oh, what's the difference between reform and very reform? I know the answer. In their mind, what they think is reform means that you're not really very religious and you're kind of lazy. And very reform means you're really lazy. Like you don't ever go to synagogue or you don't have anything to do with Judaism. So in their mind, modern, progressive, rational Judaism, to them, what it means is you're not really very Jewish and you don't care and you don't do anything. That's not what reform was meant to be. Reform was meant to be every bit as diligent and serious and religious and conscientious about their Judaism. It just meant that their expression of Judaism would be in a rational way, not just following rules, but actually making it come alive and have meaning and relevance in their life. But reform has done such a horrible job of explaining what it is that in the eyes and the minds of most Jewish people, all it means is lazy Jews, Jews who aren't very religious and don't care about their religion. That's the implication. That's why it's kind of funny, the line that the Reform are lazy, the conservative are hazy, and the Reform are crazy. I mean, these are stereotypes that are a caricature of what Jews are, but we shouldn't be that way. We should resist falling into those categories. Anybody else?
Yeah, you just touched on a point, and it was kind of like what we were saying about heritage. And I think that's another point that you can share at the high holidays, because, not to take it for granted, our Jewish heritage, but that we have to act upon it. And we have to act upon our Jewish ideals and, tzedakah and teruma and all that. I think that's important to review at the high holidays with people who don't typically come on a weekly or monthly or quarterly basis to synagogue. I think, to try to bring them back into the fold.
I think you're right. And it's kind of like going to the gym. If you go to the gym once a year, what do you get out of it? What could possibly happen? If you go regularly and you put in some effort and you work at it, you're going to reap much better rewards. And the same thing's true with Judaism. If you go once a year, what possible gain can you get? You get out what you put in. That's a really important point, Sharon, that you raised. And I will definitely, I appreciate your reminding me. I'll definitely make mention of that in the high holidays. All right, I got some good ideas now. Anybody else? All right.
Well, I was just going to say, going back to what we were talking about at the Shabbos last week, you were asking about, why is it so many young people and so many people are turning away? I know that from my own experience, one of the reasons, and you might want to bring this up also, every time I walked into temple on an Orthodox temple, every time I walked in, I'm a bad person. God is going to punish me. God is going to do that. If you don't do this, God is going to punish you. God is going to punish you. Da, 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 da. Pray. And after a while, I said to myself, wait a second. If I had a father, may he rest in peace, a kind, gentle man, but taught me lessons, but he didn't continuously threaten me. And every time I walked into the Orthodox temple, I was constantly threatened. I'm a bad person. God's going to punish me. And I said, that's an abusive father. I don't want to worship an abusive father. I don't want to be abused, and that's one of the things that really stuck in my mind as a child growing up. Everything I did, I had to atone for my sins, and I was going to be punished, and I was going to be punished. And I'm going, wait a minute. Then as I was growing up and I went into I saw a different way of living, I said, this is not for me. So that's a part of the reason why I think a lot of younger people don't really migrate towards religion, towards the Jewish religion, because, God's going to punish you. I'm not a perfect person, but I'm not the devil either. Although some people might say I am.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And also the punishment and the rules are irrational, make no sense. It's like, why would you want to keep all these rules that don't make any sense? And then on top of it, and if you don't, then you're made to feel guilty about it. So yeah, that's a prescription for a disaster. I agree with you. There's different ways of approaching religion. It could be based on fear and guilt, or it could be based on love and joy. And what you're pointing out is that a lot of expressions of not just Judaism, but a lot of religions are based on guilt and fear, fearing that something bad's going to happen because you didn't do the right thing. You should feel guilty. We should come in filled with joy and praise and love for ourselves and for other people and for the world and our heritage, and that it's just a much healthier way of looking at it. But a lot of young people don't really know their religion very well. They haven't been exposed to it. They don't know much about it. And they just form these stereotypes about religion that keep them away. And also, if you have a bad exposure, it's not a good thing. It's better that you have no exposure at all than a bad one. Like what you're suggesting, Valerie, you walk into a synagogue and it's not a good experience. I can't tell you how many times people say, well, Judaism is not for me. I went to synagogue once and it wasn't really very comfortable. I didn't really enjoy it. So that means that they now have written off every single expression of Judaism that could possibly exist, which doesn't make any sense at all. It would be like going into a restaurant and trying a food and not liking it. Okay, I'm never going to go to any restaurant again. I don't like restaurants. It would be... Or you grow up under a totalitarian regime and you say, gee, government's horrible. I don't want to live in a country that has a government. I mean, it's just very short-sighted and based on ignorance. And we're not doing a good job of teaching the full diversity of Judaism. I will also say this. The Orthodox are responsible for preserving Judaism over thousands of years. When we were tossed out of the land of Israel, and most people would have just disappeared, and the center of Jewish life, the temple and the priesthood and the sacrificial system was gone, our ancestors had to come up with something like a plan B. And plan B was, okay, follow all these rules, obey, and things will go well for you. It's kind of like a desperation to keep people together. And it worked for a while. But there's a better way of doing it now that we're free. And we don't really have to cling to that. It's kind of like when you're a little kid, parents like to lay down laws because the kids can't reason or rationalize. So they have to say, okay, do this, do this, do this. And if you don't, you'll be punished. But when the child grows and becomes mature, they learn to do things for the right reason. So Valerie, what you're describing is kind of like a childlike, infantile approach to religion. Do this, do this, do this, or daddy in the sky is going to get mad. What we should be teaching is if you do the right thing, it just reaps beautiful rewards for your life and the life of others and makes the world better. That's what we should be teaching. That's why we do it. In psychology, they call it natural consequences. not somebody imposing something. If you do this, these are the natural consequences, and it's going to be good for us. So thank you for sharing, everybody. Interesting conversation. I'll be leading a discussion after a movie about abortion on Thursday night. It's in French, if you like French, and English subtitles about what it was like to try to have an abortion in France when it was illegal. Very interesting movie. And then afterwards, I'll be discussing the issue along with Maya Malay, who's a Buddhist pastor. And we might have some others also. It's going to be Thursday night, 7:30 at the Movies of Del Rey. That's on Hagen Ranch in Atlantic. Tomorrow morning at 9:30 at the County Commission office, they were going to decide GL homes. I consider GL to stand for greedy landlords or greedy landowners. They were going to decide if they're going to get to plunder the ag reserve and make good on all the campaign contributions. But GL is asking for a postponement, which means that either they'll agree to postpone it and then there won't be a decision made, or the commissioners will say, no, we've allotted this time, we're moving forward. And then GL would have to make a presentation and it will be voted up or down. So I'll be there at 9:30. It's the government complex up in West Palm. And we'll be at the Carlisle this Friday night at 7, not 7:30. Have a nice service planned for you. It should be a lot of fun. And it's our opening night, our debut over at the Carlisle after a long hiatus. We were there before, but now we're making a debut. So if you can come on out, it should be a lot of fun. And I thank you for joining with us. And I thank